Hello and welcome to Contramundum. Our topic today is the United States federal government, the U.S. Senate, and the entire regime is involved in treason. They're trying to legalize the invasion of the United States, or at least they tried this week. They probably failed, but they're letting it happen. Today we have Josiah Lippincott joining us to discuss this and everything else. There was also an interview by Tucker Carlson of someone yesterday, someone important. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about
Not me. It was me.
It was you. Yeah, he was interviewing you about basebooks.com.
Yes,
go see it.
Based audiobooks.com.
That's right. Based audiobooks.com. Got to get that right to get the sponsorship money from CJ. But with us today is Josiah Lippincott, who is a writer, a political thinker, an analyst, a Marine Corps veteran, and a grad student or a PhD student rather, at Hillsdale College. I got to get that right. So thank you so much for joining us, Josiah. And he is also the most banned man on the internet officially.
It is true. Yeah, now that Alex Jones is back and Donald Trump are back, that leaves me. I'm still
just him.
So if Elon's watching this live stream, he needs to get on that and stop the Pentagon conspiracy that prevents me from speaking to the American people.
Yeah, I think everyone who's watching it on Twitter, or formerly the website formerly known as Twitter, should just tag Elon and say, "Let him back in. Let him back in now."
Yeah, they should free my boy, and we'll have the t-shirts. I'll print them up after we're done here.
Exactly.
Wear them in your hood of choice.
What?
Josiah Lippincott.
Was there a specific tweet that got you banned in the first place?
Well, there were, no. The technical answer is no. That's the official answer, because when I got banned, it was not associated with any tweet. They just said you violated our prohibitions. What did they say? Like on having like a safe platform, but there was no specification. So actually, last spring, Twitter reached out to me finally with I'd sent in a bunch of requests to be unbanned. And so they said, well, okay, tell us why, you should be unbanned. It was kind of more, it was obviously not just a bot. It was like a person reaching out. But even after I explained there, I was like, no one ever explained to me why I was banned. They still did not let the ban come up. But I have my theories. I did a tweet right before the ban occurred, a whole thread about what I call the sociologically the Ellis Island fraternity, and I was comparing the backgrounds of leading Democratic Party politicians, and just pointing out most of them, their ancestors came over after the late 1800s. There's just not very many Democrats who have ancestral ties to America from the founding or even from the first 100 or so years of the nation's existence. And then I was kind of pointing out how that had manifested itself. And the tweet went pretty viral. It got like 5.5 million hits before Twitter just nuked it and me. And that was December of 2021. So it's been several years.
That's pretty edgy.
Yeah, I know. Sociological analysis is really dangerous. It's a threat. Joe Biden, when his cognition clicks in, he's like, Corn Pop, sociology on twitter.com. My leg hair was being touched at the pool. It's kind of scooping the tapioca pudding in between bites. That's how you really got to complete the impersonation right there.
That's right. Did you see his clips of his press conference from yesterday?
No, but I read about them, and it's perfect. He confused the president of Egypt with Mexico. He's talking about like Francois Mitterrand is still around. Like, no, that dude died in 96.
Yeah, and he calls this press conference, and like he's apparently the one that demanded to do it because the special counsel that was investigating his classified document leak published a report, and it said no jury is ever going to convict this guy because they're going to see a feeble old man who's got failing memory. And
and he went out to redeem himself.
By immediately proving them right. We are led by geniuses. You don't understand. Look, I read that portion of the report, and I was like, he's about to get the antifreeze flavored pudding at the next White House. He's gone. We're after national mourning. We don't know what happens. Kamala's out there.
Honestly, though, I see all these people are like, oh, they're going to get rid of him. They're going to replace him with Kamala, or they're going to replace him with Michelle Obama or whatever. And it's like, no, he is the ideal president for the system.
Yeah.
There's nobody better than him.
Yeah, it's part of the ritual humiliation of modern life that guy is in any way considered to be competent or leading the country. Just lie after lie, like, oh no, he's got it all there. I noticed, I don't watch any TV, but I'll see like Instagram clips or something. My wife will show me, and it's like even all of these instances, that dude cannot follow a strain of thought at all.
No.
He's just done.
No.
Like, no impact, no idea.
No, the best is the bit of like Shane Gillis where he's like, we had Trump who gave a speech. Abu Bakr Baghdadi is dead.
Wow.
Died like a dog. And then he's like, and now we have Joe Biden. He comes out for like 5 minutes once a year, and he mumbles through a 5-minute press conference and then turns into a Roomba.
Yeah, a Roomba. He's wandering around the stage. And Trump has this great bit, and he's like, and Biden, he didn't know what to do, and he was talking, and I didn't understand, and then he walked off the stage into a wall, and that's where it just ends, right there, into a wall.
Right into a wall. Yeah, I know, it's great.
That's good. I like Shane's claim that debating Trump is the test of presidential qualities in a candidate. It's like wheel him out there like Hannibal Lecter, and no, it's perfect. They can't stump the Trump.
Yeah, well, and like the Biden thing though, I keep going back to it. And even in the Putin interview, and yeah, I don't think you've seen it yet, but like in the Putin interview, in multiple instances, he's telling Tucker that, with Bush and different U.S. officials, different U.S. Clinton before that, he's dealing with them, trying to conduct policy with them. And they would, make some kind of agreement, and then they would go back and talk to their people and say, "Oh no, we can't do that."
Yeah.
Where it's obvious that the president, no matter who it is, whether it's Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, George Bush, the elected official has no control over policy. Ultimately, it's the regime.
Problem. Yeah, it's this blob. I like that. I like people online will talk about this. The longhouse. The primordial ooze of yeast life. And that's what we're ruled by today. I mean, that's a great metaphor for what happens there. There's a woman in a pantsuit yelling at you behind closed doors. Actually, this harms women's rights and, Kazakhstan, and that means you're bad somehow. And we need to spend billions of dollars because you're racist. That's what you got. And it shows just the kind of, there's all this political science, a lot of regime analysis, is this a democracy or an oligarchy? And it's like, you can't, those are just words. Like, look at what's happening. Like, who's in charge in this regime? And it's this class of people who are just crazed. I mean, absolutely disconnected from reality and undeserving of their position.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Yeah. And you see it with the topic that we made earlier in the week, and I knew it was probably going to get scuttled, the border bill, but you see it where after the Texas, I don't even know what you want to call it. I mean, because it wasn't really nullification, resistance to the federal government in like the tiniest terms.
Right.
But that propelled immigration into the very forefront of national conversation. And you see these polls that say 60% of the country favor mass deportation. They want, like, it's extraordinarily popular to close the border, to end illegal immigration, like 70% plus. I mean, even like almost, 50-50 for Democratic voters to want to do something. And so you see the political, at least popular will is totally there, right? Crown lying in the gutter kind of thing.
Right.
And then you have this dopey James Lankford put together this deal where it's like, actually, we're going to let in 4,999 illegals a day before we close down the border. And that's the best we can do. Sorry.
Yeah.
Plus, all the thing that's tied to it is like 65 billion to Ukraine and like 17 billion to Israel. And then it's several more billion to Taiwan. And it's clearly like they're using this as leverage to get the thing they actually want.
Yeah.
Right? To try to throw a little bit of red meat to the public, but really get to fleece us, to give it all to Ukraine to go to Zelensky's cocaine habit.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. And what I observe in all this is that, and I've made this point to people who I know who are in positions of influence or power inside the system, and I want to say, it's like, law is founded on legitimacy. It does not spring out of the ground sui generis as just, well, it's a law. I have a piece of paper that says I'm in charge and that I'm in control. It said, no, you actually have to do stuff and have certain strengths in order to stay in power. And conservatives have no idea. Like, there's one of the guys who failed to vote for the impeachment of Mayorkas out of California, Tom McClintock. And I called his office and I was like, what are you doing? What's the plan? It's like, and he's got this 10-page document about how his principles prevent him from voting to kick out a guy who's betraying his oath of office. And it's like quoting these legal scholars. Well, Dershowitz says this, but Lawrence Tribe. And I said, look, this is so Talmudic. I mean, it's like literally, well, Rabbi this. No. You got to reconnect to reality. It's just textual. At a certain point, just nonsense layered on nonsense. Yeah. It's like, this is not, you got to figure out, what is government for? What is government for? And then you need to do that. And that's so hard. Anybody who's not Trump, like, they don't. Well,
you also got to, it's not only that, but you got to figure out, like, what year is it? Like, what's going on in the world? Like, this is the way that law and constitution is always a big hurdle for conservatives. Like, the left doesn't pay attention to any of it. But conservatives, before they act, they have to make sure they have all their principle, checklist all done. And it's like, the left literally does not care about your constitution. It doesn't care about your legal precedent. It's on a revolution, and it's not going to stop till it gets there. So you got to make a decision. You got to find out who your friends are, find out who your enemies are, and actually, push around some political muscle.
Yeah. I have principles, but the leading one is winning.
Yeah,
I like winning.
Yes.
It's like, people like, America's an idea. It's like, I agree, but I think my idea of what America is different than your cringe lib version of whatever that is, right? My idea of America doesn't involve hordes of third world foreigners settling on our shores and then consuming our resources. That's bad, and I don't want that. Yeah. So it's like, well, the Constitution is designed to protect our rights and liberties, and by that it meant, like, citizens, and that's not just whoever signed a piece of paper. Again, that goes back to the words problem. Well, I have a piece of paper, it has words on it. It's like, that's not politics at all.
Yeah, it's the Pompey quote, right? You're quoting laws that men with swords, right?
Yeah,
right. That's like conservatives today is. I mean, you see this, like, CJ got into it on Twitter, and I wish you were there, because you'd probably be right there with him, with Jenna Ellis earlier in the year.
Yeah, she's insane. That woman's dumb as a post.
It was so ridiculous, because I mean, what was your tweet, CJ, that you made that got her going?
I don't even remember. It was something about how I basically just postured myself against the regime, and I just said, look, I don't care about it at all. Like, I'm not here to defend it. I do appreciate our heritage and our people, but the regime is my enemy. And she's like, look, these are a bunch of anarchists, or whatever.
Yeah. And I think you said something about the Constitution that I think is what got her hackles up, where it's like, we might have to use extra constitutional means to deal with our enemies. And
I didn't even say that. I think it was like,
you implied it, though. I think
the point was that, like, our solutions are more political than they are electoral. And they just can't take that. They just it goes outside their comfort zone.
Oh man, she had a tweet earlier this year about blasphemy laws, and she was like, the founders would have resisted blasphemy laws. She was attacking some conservative thing, and it's like, if you Google Founding Fathers blasphemy, the #1 hit is an article from Harvard being like, yeah, the founders totally did have blasphemy laws and thought that was bad.
Yeah.
I mean, these people are so, I mean, what's amazing to me is looking at someone like Ellis, who has no virtues, none. I mean, she's not even like, whoa, that's a stunner. I can see why someone was like fooled. It's like nothing's going on in her mind or in her life, but yet she's an influencer. She's propped up in front of the American people, is allowed to blather all day long. And it's just like, we got to get past this kind of these people. We need to get with this. These people are a problem. our influencer class, with a few mostly anonymous exceptions, is terrible. It's terrible. It's people I think are promoted because they're mediocrities. And that's important to keep in mind when dealing with conservative incorporated.
I don't even understand where people like that come from. Like, Trump didn't have any better choices to build his legal team. I mean, maybe not. Maybe they have reputations to keep and contracts to save. I don't know.
Well, and I've noticed there's a ton of these, like a bunch of the women who worked for Trump have betrayed him. Alyssa Farah, Jenna Ellis, Omarosa. I mean, and there's and if you go back, I think, who was the woman who managed his campaign? Kellyanne Conway. Yeah, she initially supported Ted Cruz.
Ted Cruz, yeah.
And it's like, look, and what I would say to anyone interested in politics is you need men who are loyal to you to be your advisors. It's like, it's who's the lady who is the blonde woman who was Trump's secretary, or
Kelly or McEnany?
McEnany. Yeah, McEnany. Yeah, right.
Kayleigh McEnany. Yeah.
Kayleigh McEnany. Right. Yeah. But she started off. She was at 28. She was a CNN contributor. She denounces Trump. Then she had a conversation with a colleague who was a smart kind of lib who was like, this Trump's going to win this all. And you would be wise to switch and become pro-Trump and ride that to power. And she did. And then it worked. And it's like, we need it. And it's frustrating to me to watch that. It's like, look, we need more seriousness on the right in terms of, if you have bad political instincts, you got to pay for that. Like people out there supporting the Ron DeSantis boondoggle, that needs to be the kind of thing where keep a list and check it twice in the future, because that's like insane political instincts. Like I wrote an article in December of 2022 where I was like, Ron DeSantis should not run for president in 2024. It would be a disaster, and he will pay. And I was right. I nailed it. Like just down the middle. I was like, you're going to take all this money you have in your fund and you're going to burn it. Yeah. I mean, look, he spent like something like $150 million, $200 million. Look, Ron, for a 10% cut, I could have saved you for 15 mil. I would have saved you 135 million.
We said the same thing on here. It's the exact same thing. And I was only going to take 5%. So
look at that. It's got to be a better deal. Ron should have reached out.
That's the thing. Like, and all the people, like all the people on Twitter and online, that were, at least the ones that were around in 2015 to 2016, like 90% of them were DeSantis people, were Ted Cruz people, and they became DeSantis people, and it's just the same thing all over again. But after Trump won, then they're like, oh yeah, he's good, I guess, and they returned like a dog to their vomit to the same, boring old conservative, true conservative campaigning, and
they're losers.
And they have no idea. They had, Mystery Grove had a good postmortem on the DeSantis on the DeSantis campaign. It was really funny too. And he basically said like, these people, he said basically the same thing is these people that supported him and pushed him, right? They can't have any future because they did not understand what occurred in 2016. It wasn't about this man himself that everyone was all about. It's that finally after decades, right, the actual American people are represented by a political figure in a way they had never been before, and he resonated and connected with the people in their actual interests. And CJ and I both were coming out of libertarianism at the time, and I remember when he's like, "Why are we in NATO? The Cold War's over," and like the freak out after that, and I was like, "Oh, he's the real deal." Like this is, and I'm seeing like everything that's happening was happening to him and continue to happen to him even into his administration. In my mind, is like, this is identical to what they would have done if Ron Paul had been like the presidential contender and then won the election, right? Yeah. They would have done every single thing to him. The same thing.
Yeah. And one of the things, pointing out is like, one of the questions, I was on Twitter very briefly before I got banned. One of my many alt accounts.
I followed
not one now. I was actually on my own name, and I usually am. to avoid this, but I remember Max Nordau, respecter or whatever, this big DeSantis guy, and I just kept hammering him. I was like, Max, explain to me how Ron DeSantis is going to win in the upper Midwest. Riddle me that one, Batman. Because I was like, I just got back from a Trump rally in Dayton, Ohio on a Monday night before the election, and 15,000 people showed up. And if your boy showed up in the middle of nowhere, Michigan, on a weeknight, you'd be lucky if like 100 people showed up. It's like, look, you got to see reality for what it is. Trump is the closest thing to a world historical figure that we have right now. That guy is something. He is a meteor. He's something unusual, potent, vital. You can use all the adjectives you want. He is not like these other people. And then it becomes about policy wonkery, which turns into policy wankery. And it's just, there's no point. It's like, I don't care. It's like, I don't care. For one, you people don't understand how power works, as evidenced by the fact that you really haven't won that much. And Trump has won in the sense of he causes these people to go crazy and reveal who they are. And that is about the best you're going to do right now, is just come to grips with what's happened to the country. If we can do that, then we can start addressing the real problems. But instead, it's like, here's my 10,000 word essay on why actually 2016 didn't happen. And I was right all along, if you really think about it. And I'm a genius and whatever.
Marco Rubio would have totally beat Hillary Clinton anyway.
Oh, for real. Until the blackmail tapes on him dropped.
The phone parties come out.
Well, I who can say? It's just like Marco Rubio. Yeah, that's a guy. If you airdrop him into Ohio, people will just flock to hear his words. Like, no. Look at reality.
No.
Yeah, it was. I mean, we said that's the whole time, that like the point of Trump is not Trump. It's like he's a proxy, and it's not even about like restoring our faith in the American system. No, he's our proxy because we're pissed off at the regime that hates us. We want to express our hatred back at the regime. And if you give us approved candidates like DeSantis and all the consultancy class gurus are riding up behind DeSantis, like that's a big red flag. Nobody wants that anymore. We're done with Bush. We're done with that whole world of GOP. So
that's over. I mean, and people keep talking about the future, and I'm like, look, there is no future in Ron DeSantis and company. There's nothing there. Look, with the way the immigration trends are going, I mean, and these things can be hard to predict. I'm just pointing out, it's like, will you even be politically relevant? The plan for the country is the favelization of the world. It's the global slum. That's the plan. That's what they want for you. And you either get that or you don't. You either see it or you don't. You either can recognize reality and see what's coming, or you just are in a dream world, dream space, clown country. Yeah. There's a unicycle in your mind. It's like with the Homer Simpson, with like the monkey hitting the cymbals inside the bed. That's right. Like, that's what it is. That's like what's going on.
Yeah, there was a tweet from a colleague of yours actually, Miles Smith at Hillsdale.
Dr. Smith. Yeah.
and he said, and I want to be fair to him, but it was just comical, man. Where he's like, people are not prepared for the reality of what politics post-Trump is going to look like, right? It's basically assuming that everything's going to revert back to the mean, that we're just going to go back to the Bush years and the Bush Republican Party or whatever. And it's like, man, you do not get it at all. Yeah, the toothpaste out of the tube. It's not going back.
Well, and I think a big part of that is what they're doing to Trump right now. You have to get what that is, right? Yes. They want to put him in prison. They want to put him in prison, and they are trying. They have arrested him. Multiple times. I mean, or is no one paying attention to what that means? Yeah. It's like, and then I was at what shall remain unnamed conservative conference in the spring of last year, right after Trump was like he was getting arrested for something, and all these attendees are talking about like religion in the public life and like things like, and one of the questions I was like, okay, so they did arrest the former president. Like, what do you make of that? And you could just tell there was like, that made people really uncomfortable. And it was like, but you got to get what that means. They're using every means at their disposal to try and get this guy out of office and to harm him. This is not republicanism. It's not democracy. If you think the system is going to work, you're already lost. But But if you come to it like, yeah, this system is broken, then you can start to see reality.
Yeah, you're already in a third world banana republic. I mean, the 2020 election, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Right. I don't, we're on YouTube, so there's not, much we could say. It was fortified. But but like I don't know how people could witness that happen, and then everything after that, with him being arrested and indicted, being sued for defending himself against a false rape charge, and then losing the lawsuit for defending himself, and losing $80 million.
Yeah,
like all of that. It's insane.
Rule of law. You need to be a rule of law respecter. You don't understand. All the people who said that Donald Trump urinated on prostitutes in Moscow, they weren't slandering him. Yeah. That could have been true. But this crazy lady who doesn't remember even what year, she was allegedly touched in her no-no place by the Donald. You have to understand, it's wrong to attack her. It's wrong.
Yeah. You can't
look, at a certain point, it's like, look, I'm not going to convince people with arguments. You just either you get it or you don't. Arguments are for people whose brains are on. And a lot of these people are fanatics. They're ready to die for the Fuhrer. In the case, the Fuhrer is Joe Biden and global liberalism, mass migration from Somalia.
Whatever, yeah. Yeah, no, they are fanatics. That's exactly it. And I mean, and it isn't just, Trump is obviously the canary in the coal mine for all of it that should make people see what's actually going on. But you just saw it this week. Mark Stein was sued for defamation for arguing with about climate change. And of course you have, Doug Mackey, Ricky Vaughn going to prison for memes. And then, all of the J6ers who, if they just got near there are people that are being charged with felonies for going near the Capitol, not even going in it.
Yeah.
And hundreds of people.
Yeah, I think I know about a half dozen people who are currently facing or have faced criminal charges related to what amounts substantially to political activity, and their lives are being wrecked over this.
Yeah, going to a protest, and you're going to go to prison over it. It's and so if you think it's America, we have a constitution, there's rule of law. It's like no, there is not. There isn't. And the backdrop too is we had the most destructive riots in our lifetimes,
and nothing happened.
And nothing happened to those people.
And Jim Jordan just came out with some report about how payment processors and banks like Stripe and others are keeping track of purchases from firearms and pawn shops. And it's like you have a social credit system. I'm censored, and I believe I'm censored because of the American government. I actually know that to be true. There were military officers in uniform who mass reported my account in order to get me censored.
Yeah,
that's what happened. I know that happened. They leaked my personnel file illegally.
Yeah,
this is still not. I'm still trying to fight to get the FOIA requests for them to unlock the ramifications of the reports on the investigation. But I know that happened. I watched it happen. I lost my voice because of it. And then people will talk to me about free speech and the rule of law, and it's just like, what are you talking about? Like, what free speech? I can't talk on Twitter, the biggest social media platform in the world. I can't do it. Right.
Yeah, which is supposedly free now. And
and it's like even Elon Musk. It's like, look, I think Musk has done some good things, and there are more important voices than mine who have been taken out of the ban hammer slammer. But that's just the reality. It's like I'm still over here unable to have a voice and say in my own country, a country in whose uniform. People forget this. I served the country. I wanted to serve. Protect my rights and liberties. I did have that in mind when I was a young man, joined the military. And I'm critical now, but that's kind of the right. They still serve who stand and wait. And, that's what I did. And then it's kind of like, well, you're really bad, actually. It's like, what crime did I commit? I would really love if Elon Musk would get up there and be like, actually, just say it. Just say the words. Call me a name. Say Josiah Lippincott is really bad. And that's why we have him banned. Be more honest. Just be honest. Don't pussyfoot behind the door like safety, community standards, blah 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 blah. No, just say it.
So one of the things I want to ask you, because it's all been, CJ loves this because it's all black pilling. So CJ is a very Spengler pilled. Optimism is cowardice.
I live in California, so
many such cases. There's right. Spengler's running like wildfire on the right.
Yeah. But I mean, what do you see,
Sure.
like, as far as the optimistic case of how things could go from here? Because I think these things are happening. I mean, sometimes stuff like this has to happen in order for political will to be summoned. Like, you look at I look at the example of like El Salvador,
Yeah.
that they had the highest murder rate in the world, and then boom, here comes Bukele, and now it's a free and safe and prosperous, orderly society, and they just jailed all the bad people, right?
Yeah.
Go figure.
Right.
And so, but it took things being extremely bad. I mean, in ways that we can't even fathom in America, even
Right.
having said everything we did,
Right.
for that will to be summoned. And I feel like it's starting to happen very, very slowly,
Yeah.
much more slowly than I want it to. But I mean, do you agree with that? Do you think that change is coming, that things are going to get better politically, that that leaders will arise to fight it to win, and
Yeah.
that there's a reason for optimism?
Well, there's always a reason for optimism. There's a quote I like. As long as man continues to be created by man and the sun, as opposed to man and the laws, there's always nature, and there's always something in man that can't just be beaten out of him by authority, the laws.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's always a possibility. And I think there's always going to be, and not always in large numbers, but I think there always are what I would call real men who are not simply slavish to the commands of the primordial ooze, and who want more and who want something better. And I think there are a lot of those types in our time, and I think they're becoming more of them. I got a lot more clear politically once I saw, I mean, I think I have some good instincts politically. I gravitated to Trump very early. And in the fall of 2015, when I got out of OCS, I mean, I'd been following the news while I was basically in a boot camp environment. But as soon as I got out, I was like, Trump's my guy. And, I think I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people who are becoming more clear about what's really going on in our regime. And it doesn't take that many of those types of people to really change things. A lot of that NPC meme is right. There's a lot of people, if the rainbow flags got replaced with swastikas, there wouldn't be any meaningful change in their lives. I mean, they could go from extreme left to extreme right without any kind of cognitive dissonance, because that's not the way they live their lives. It's like, whatever's popular, that's what I'm going to do. And that's obviously very problematic, but it shows it's just not. They're actually, the actual amount of people in the country who are really political, is actually pretty small. And I kind of argued at points, is like, young white men with guns are really important demographic within the regime. And I would arguably say the most important. That's how political power gets exercised. And the regime knows that. If you look at like any special operations unit, if you look at who is at the tip of the spear, and when they went and arrested J6 dude, and they sent in a battalion of these, joint terrorism task force types. And so it shows you that political power for the regime depends actually a very small foundation. And it's possible to erode that support, I think. And I've been working at that for the last couple of years, of just making clear to young men. Yeah, it's like, to make clear to young men who have those talents, you need to understand the regime is trying to abuse you. It's abusing your patriotism. It's abusing your loyalty. And it is racial, and it is political, and it is religious. Conservatives, that makes them really uncomfortable. But I think that's changing too, because it's just becoming obvious. I mean, they make it clear, like, you cannot do the crazy has ramped up dramatically, and I think that is in a way liberating. It's liberating for thought, and I think to go back to the question, the greatest source of optimism today is the possibility of young men asserting themselves and wanting to lead. I mean, I think there's very few things you can do more important than to cultivate your body, your mind, and your ambition if you're a young man.
No, I agree with that. For sure. I think that's immigration plays into that, though. Like, you can overwhelm a system with just a bunch of invaders, and you can overwhelm, key areas. And that's, like, I think that's part of the point of immigration, is to just overwhelm, like, city centers and political centers, and all that with like just you, because you can't like politically act like in my town in California, they're trying to deputize and allow like illegal immigrants to hold actual police power like in this state. Like, do you think
That's great.
those types of people are going to push back against like Newsom's insanities? No, they're going to be all on board with it. Like, immigration is their way of circumventing young men who are trying to find a way to preserve what they have.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I just, it's like people talk about, there's no way all these people could go back. It's like, oh, there is a way. I mean, some of it make people sad to see them, but there's been a lot of, what euphemism would be, the left is engaged in population transfers throughout the 20th century. I mean, I don't know why anyone would think that couldn't happen again. I think after World War II, the Allies basically ethnically cleansed huge swaths of Europe. That's why there are only Poles in Poland. There used to be Germans and Czechs and Ukrainians, and no, that's not the way that is now. And you can use, and it's like the best thing if you were the regime is don't provoke more. I mean, I don't sit here saying what I really want is just crazy stuff to happen. It's like, no, I want to avoid that if we can do it. And I support moderate centrism. I support Donald Trump and a colorblind meritocracy. I think that's probably the best we can do right now. But this regime, they should let it happen. They should have let Trump win. They should have let the 90s happen for as long as possible. Don't do the crazy. Don't regress to the resentful mean. But they can't. And so, you can try all the mass immigration stuff, but then you have people like, well, you bust these people in. What if we just bust them all back?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and that point that you make, we've made that several times before too. It's funny, like the wavelength is that we're on is the same, where it's like they could have just let Trump do his presidency and not obstructed him in the insane ways, just in the normal political process, not vote for the things that he wanted to or whatever. And what would have happened? Nothing. Like things would have been normal. They could have actually reverted back to the previous paradigm of, Mitt Romney type Republicans in charge of everything. And that's gone now. Because they ramped up the crazy, there is a necessary reaction to it. Yeah. Right. And so that's, I mean, that alone, like, gives me a ton of hope. Is it forces people to come to grips with, right? You have like drag queens in public libraries in like small towns in Minnesota where I live.
In military
people see this. Yeah, that too, and the furry masks and things like that. Yeah. It's all of this insanity is everywhere, and it's forcibly put there by law, by political power, and people, like normal people who just want to grill and watch NFL football and not care about anything, see this and are like, this is messed up. This is bad. I want someone to fix it. And that number grows.
Yeah, and I think even more than that, you have a lot of young men, and I would say people who are kind of in my situation who look at the world and like, wait a second, this is bad for me. For one, and I get, it's like trying to explain things to lib boomers. Said, okay, so you've got all these young men of talent out there. You're not going to promote them. You're going to call them racist, and you're going to make them miserable. And the expectation is they're going to do what you want them to do. It's like, do you not understand that you kind of need them? You need them to be well paid. You need them to have positions of responsibility and to be on your team. That's called legitimacy. That's how you get it. And it's like, no, we're just actually going to flip those people the bird, and we're going to, embrace diversity in the craziest way. Libs could just talk about diversity. You could make that. Man, I just love how much diversity we have. I mean, you could make it. You have we have so many Poles and Italians and Hungarians. You could do any of that kind. You could be like, but to embrace it in the dumbest way possible, like affirmative action for people who are straight up incompetent and in key positions of leadership. That is not going to go well. I mean, it's like all the stuff Boeing's got wrong. It's like, everybody knows. It's like, you could have just said, we really love diversity, but meanwhile, we're going to keep all of our engineers as really smart white dudes who are making a ton of money and super happy. we love diversity and meritocracy, and whoever has a talent we'll hire. And that could even be true. I mean, I I'd support that. But nope, you got to do the crazy. Our transgender CEO has embraced drag queens as pilots, and it's racist to put bolts inside the engine to keep it to the aircraft. You don't understand. That's the patriarchy. Math.
But that's part of the humiliation ritual. Like they need that aspect of it too. Like it's not just about, like coming on board with the narrative. It's like they have a deep-seated hatred of Western civilization. I think that drives a lot of it too.
Yeah, they're just boiling with resentment. I mean, it's like when you see fat, ugly, obese liberals, what is it? It's adipose tissue is also just resentment. I think it's a physical manifestation of the vicious hatred of life, and they can't stop themselves because in a way Western civilization is really triggering it. Think about what it's like. You have to wash your hands. You got to remember every day to brush your teeth. You can't drink while you're driving because there's rules and laws and order and time. You got to show up. If you aren't in that, you forget just how oppressive that can feel. It's like, that's right. You got to repress your lower instincts. You can't just wild out. But there's a human type, like, just wants to dissolve itself back into the ooze and be like, I just want to live in a world where all I have to do is worry about filling my stomach and rubbing my genitals. And that it's just a spiritual orientation that humankind, within man, there are two wolves. And you're never getting rid of it. You got to choose. Civilization is not a thing that just happens. It's a choice that you make. And if you can even make that choice, if that's a choice that's available to you, which is, that's a deeper question. But, and again, defenders of, conservatives like, well, I want civilization without having to be mean. And it's like, well, but civilization is kind of mean. It just is. It's like, no, you cannot do whatever you want with your lower organs. You just can't. You can't do that and have civilization. You got to say it, and that makes people sad. But you got to do it if you want to have.
Well, and it's a lot of it is just the feminization of the culture is that, like, it takes men to be able to say mean things that are sometimes unpopular. That are true and right. But like women, generally speaking, they want peace. They want everyone to get along. Right? That's like the mode that they're in. Like, that's how God made them to want to pursue peace within social structures.
I think that's their mode within appropriate social structures. But when you give them like power and they run a gynocracy, then you're gonna get like a whole bunch of petty fights everywhere. That's what you're seeing.
I just wrote a really long piece on this, inspired by all the recent coverage. I wrote it on Taylor Swift and kind of what her art tells us. And the conclusion I came to is, Taylor's life, her music and her work embody the problem faced by a lot of these women. In some of her songs, there's this great song that she has, Invisible String. And she's like, it's all about how destiny's bringing her together with the man that she knows she needs to love. But there's no compass. She says this, there's no compass and no sign. And I was like, right, because that's accident. And just stuff's happening to you and you don't know what's going on. And it's like, you need an authority. You need someone who authoritatively is telling you, stop wilding out. You're hurting yourself. Do you like this? Do you like being in pain? Do you like having boyfriend after boyfriend break your heart? And it's like, Taylor can make it into art that's compelling to millions of women. But if you're an ordinary woman, the reason you find that compelling is you're getting raked over the coals spiritually, and there's no upside. There's no private plane and $1 billion, world tour on the other side of it. It's just domestic and personal chaos. And the point is there's this slogan on the right, men just need to man up and marry those hoes is one way of putting this. and my point would be like, oh no, men do need to man up, but not to serve. It's to lead and to be authoritative. Be like, just so many things in life can just be stopped. If one man stands up and says, we are not going to do the crazy. We're just not doing it. And I'm not going to stand for it. It's like, how many marriages could be saved if these women who are like, I'm unhappy. My life is so miserable. You don't understand me. I've fallen out of love. My passions are going crazy. And a man just stands there like, no, we're not going to blow up our lives because of your feelings. We're not going to wreck civilization because you saw a photo that made you sad. We're not going to do that. And it's like, you need women. Women are great. Women help make civilization possible. Women provide for the future. I think marriage is great. I like being around my wife. I think it's awesome. I want her to have a great life. But the point is if you want civilization, you have to have the strength and the willingness to push and be like, no, we're not doing the crazy. I'm not going to let you hurt yourself and keep ripping up your life over insanity. And we need that as a civilization, like right now, more than ever.
And this is a subject we talk about, quite a bit here, just within the context of the church, that your typical, evangelical church, is gynocratic, and it's, an evangelical megachurch is built for women, right? The sermons are made for women. All the worship music is for women to make them feel good. And there are precious few, like tiny few pastors who talk like the way you just did for the last couple minutes, right? Yeah. Almost nobody, because the second you do that, you're going to be run out of your church. You're not going to have a job, and your family's going to starve. And so you got to keep the women happy. You can't step on any toes. But like, there are entire chapters in the Bible that say the husband is the head of the home. The wife has to submit to him. They don't ever touch those. They're terrified of those. They can't talk about those ever.
Yeah.
But that's the reality. Like, the Bible is placed in the reality of the world that God created. Right. And there it is. Like, you got to say it.
And I would add just to that is I've seen that same tendency in Catholic churches, in all churches, every denomination. We've all got the same problem. Nietzsche has this great line. Yeah. I think it's in, I'm going to forget. In one of his accounts is, the God has become a grandmother, just like really nice and like about helping your feelings. And God isn't judge. He's not the father who is authoritative. And then it becomes about your feelings. But then it becomes empty. It's like women are not happy right now. And no. Just the amount of misery that I see is amazing. And a lot of it is self-inflicted. And a lot of it is also driven, by the lack of cultural norms. It's a lack of guidance that helps you live your life in a healthy way. It's especially bad among blue-collar Americans. They just have been ravaged. And it's really hard. Like if you're a high school educated man in America, and you're just in a blue-collar town, the idea that you're going to marry a woman who's not overweight and does not have children from a prior relationship is 10%, 20, maybe. I mean, it's just not your life. That is your wife is going to weigh more than you. That just is, you go into it knowing that's your future is the SpongeBob, sweatpants at the Walmart and it's horrible. It's like, that's bad for everybody involved. And I know I have a lot of haters, a lot of people who don't like me. They don't like the way I put things. They don't like my tone.
I can't imagine. No.
Yeah, but the point I always make is say, look, I actually want things to be better. And I am committed to that. I live that way myself. Yeah. It's like, I do not hate women. I don't like seeing them miserable. That's not good for me. It's like, and it's just the willingness. And I would say to go back to the question about religion in the church is the priestly virtues are not the same as the virtues of the wise or of the virtues of the warrior. They're different. Piety is not courage. Piety is not wisdom. And a huge problem in these churches is you have people who, I think at this point they should just ban the sermon /homily, because these guys don't know. They can't do it. They just want to blather because they think that the way is to just do this, go along, get along, and not confront anything serious. It's like, at this point, just stop. It's not the play. You don't want to. It's like, we live in a country where Christianity is under attack from the leading heresy of our day, which is liberalism and communism. Yeah. And the church can't even, it wants to make peace there, and it won't be able to do that, I think, ultimately.
Well, yeah, because you're right. It's led by priests in that paradigm that you present. It's not led by warriors. And in the history of the church, there are periods where the leaders of the church are much more martial and warlike, and fight and are willing to die for what they believe. And I go into it like when I preach, man, like I think about that a lot, right? I think about that as I'm like right now I'm preaching through the book of Acts, and you have the apostles are going, like Paul, the sermons I'm preaching now, everywhere he's going, he's being beaten and stoned and attacked. And I think, like, I mean, think about the leaders we have today in the church. Do we have anyone like that at all? I mean, look at what happened in 2020. You didn't have anybody, hardly anybody, a handful of guys who fought to keep their churches open.
Yeah, and the church I was attending at the time did shut down. I sent a reply all to the congregation to that memo, and then I was removed from the email list. But it was great. It wasn't like I could like face social pressure at church because it was closed. Yeah. But you're right on that point. I think in the sense of we need that more spirited, thumatic drive. There's this kind of thing that floats around on the right, like Christianity is kind of a gay religion. It's like for women, all this kind of thing. And it's like, look, that's not how this works. Christianity has a long tradition of martial virtue and power and conquest. You can argue that's biblical or not. You can't deny that Christians have been some of the most ruthless and efficient killers in human history. Just simply put, whether you think that was good or bad. And the point is, paganism, atheism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, there are ways of interpreting all of these belief systems in ways that are life-affirming and strong and manly, and in ways that are mediocrity embracing, death embracing, and in decline. You can do it either. There's always a way to make that go one way or the other. And so the question of, so people just get way too hung up on that. It's like you're not paying attention to the phenomenon itself. Like, what is going on here? The expression of religious life is mediated through the people who express it in some critical way. It's a huge problem, I think, in our time, where pastors and priests have really just failed their congregations in a significant way. But it's also an opportunity. It's like, because it says to those who are willing to take a stand, or then that will come to the fore. And I think it's kind of inevitable if there's a civilization left for us to save or preserve.
Yeah. I think there will be. That's the hope.
I'm hopeful. Yeah. I mean, it's, what are you going to do? Like, what do you, like, bury me and put it on my headstone? Well, at least he was right.
That's right. Well, I know I don't know how much more time you have. I hope you have more time here, because I wanted to talk to you about, your PhD thesis, because you told us a little bit about it, and I'm fascinated by it. We had a conversation with Lafayette Lee a few months back about the New Deal and FDR, and so we're very interested in those subjects. So tell us a little about your PhD that you're working on, your dissertation.
The sneak preview. Well, the dissertation was sparked by my service in the Marine Corps. I was sent to Okinawa for 7 months on a deployment, so they sent us there. We were stationed out of California, but then we were sent out there for a couple months. And while I was there, I got really interested in how America got there. Like, why am I on this base on Okinawa? Like, what happened? And so in the process, I really started digging into World War II in the Far East and getting into the causes of the war and then the aftermath. And so my dissertation is sort of an exploration of America's founding principles, contrasting them to FDR and progressive principles, and then the conduct of the war, and then the creation of the New World Order after 1945. So it's a kind of a sweeping topic, but made more simple by the focus on these sort of snapshots and the question of justice. What role did justice and ideas of justice play in the progressive and liberal internationalist imagination? And so it's a revealing topic, and I think I've really made some kind of original headway and insight into what's going on.
So do you think the like a lot of people on the right, refer to it in Burnham's words, like the managerial revolution? I mean, like, would you call that basically like a point of major change when the entire system transformed into something else?
Yeah, I mean, I think the liberal period definitely transformed America in some very key ways. The progressives put a lot more emphasis on expertise and management. But what I really get into is the changing view of justice. They abandoned the older natural rights framework that the founders had used, which sees the nation exists to preserve the rights of the people. It does not exist to end bad things happening in other places. We're not here to, and then it's really kind of a non-interventionist form of government, other than when you're in self-defense. Like, you can trade with other powers, but Russia, for instance, is being mean to Ukraine. The founders would have looked at that and said, we have nothing to do with this conflict. And that actually sprung out of the world order that existed from about the 1600s through 1945, which was that, war was presumed. The question of the justice of each conflict was not the question of legitimacy under international law. So the bracketing of war, that's kind of a Schmittian term from Carl Schmitt. You need to bracket conflicts. And the question isn't who's right and wrong. It's the question of you need to follow certain objective, generally observed rules. You need to have a state, a flag, a command structure. You need to, you need to take prisoners a certain way. Amnesty follows a certain surrender and amnesty go together. That follows a certain form. And that older way of war and that way of conceiving of political life was a lot more restrained than the post-1945 globalist international view, which I think just ultimately dissolves all authorities and wages war on the state. So we're living in the catastrophic consequences of the creation of that world order. And it's worth exploring. I was talking to a scholar the other day, and he was like, you could tell when he was like, do you think that the right is going to spend the next few decades refighting World War II? And he kind of had this sigh as he said it. And my response was, yeah, we will, because that war created our world order. And so my take is not, it's not about saying, well, the fascists were actually right. My point is that the war was transformative, and there were more choices than just the dichotomy presented between you had to choose authoritarianism or freedom. That wasn't the choice, because we allied ourselves with Joseph Stalin. And that's really problematic. And when you start getting into the relationship between the United States and the Soviets and the communists more broadly, it's very troubling, very, very troubling. And it's like, did we need to do that? Was that? And then the way it's presented in historiography is there was no choices. No one could have done anything other than what they did. And I'm here to say that's not true at all. There were options that were, I think, better, and they did not involve giving billions of dollars in aid to Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and Ho Chi Minh. And we can talk about that if you want, but the war in the East caused some problems, to put it mildly, I think.
Yeah, we definitely should talk about that. How much do you have? How much time do you have, CJ?
I'm good for now. I mean,
okay, good.
Chatting.
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, we'll do a second hour.
Yeah.
But I want to be sensitive to your time too, Josiah, because we really appreciate you coming. But yeah, I think, I mean, even just focusing on the East, because it's called a world war, and it is obviously a world war, but the two theaters are so very different. Just even from like the domestic perspective, like in November, December 1941, before Pearl Harbor, people were not totally opposed to going to war with Japan. It still was not popular. It wasn't a majority of the people, but it was overwhelmingly unpopular to go to war with Germany whatsoever. It was like 80+% of the country was against warfare with Germany. And we were already at war with Germany as of September 1941.
Yes.
Like we were bombing German submarines. September 11th, 1941, very important date. And so I guess, if we just want to focus on the East, I mean, we could look at both of them, because this is a topic where I could spurg out here for like 5 hours.
Many
with you.
cases.
Just give me a map and let's go.
Right.
But no, I think like the East especially, allying with Joseph Stalin, like that's the thing. I remember being a seventh grader, and we're doing our year-long World War II history unit, and I was, when you're 13 years old, you have to pick a thing to be interested in anyway. I picked World War II, and I was reading all about it and fascinated by it, reading biographies of MacArthur and Patton and everything. And I remember thinking, like, wait a second, like Joseph Stalin killed tens of millions of people.
Yeah.
And we went on his side.
You're right.
That's weird.
It is weird.
Why did that happen?
Yeah, it's a more complicated question, and it shows, I think one of the problems with talking about the European theater of the war is that it's so tied into our domestic politics now. Like Adolf Hitler is no longer a historical figure. He's a religious figure.
Yeah.
And he's the sort of the antithesis of what is everything that's good, true, and beautiful. And so when you talk to people about, because everyone's a Nazi. The Russians call the Ukrainians Nazis. The Ukrainians call the Russians Nazis. Putin is a Nazi. Zelensky's a Nazi. Trump, Biden. It's so rife in our political discourse. It's almost impossible, I think, to get clear on that in a sort of serious and analytical way. But the Far East is different because people know less about it, and it's not so fraught mythologically or religiously. It doesn't have the same moral weightiness, and so you can actually look at the history and treat it just, well, what happened, and then analyze it. And one of the key takeaways I've had is the United States under FDR and under Harry S. Truman had just made insane, I think, decisions in the Far East. We in Vietnam and Indochina, we assisted Ho Chi Minh in taking over the country in 1945. The OSS at the very end of the war, the FDR was like, I want the French out of their colony in Indochina. They need to be gone. And he tells this to Stalin. At one point at the Tehran conference, in private conversation, Stalin and FDR talking, and FDR is like, I want to see reform along Soviet lines in India. And it's Stalin who moderates him. And this is all in the Foreign Relations of the United States documents online. You can all just go read the minutes. I think it's Charles Bolin is the guy who does all the minutes for that particular meeting. It's just right there. And it's Stalin who's like, whoa, I don't know if we should do the communism thing in India. But the United States in 1943, there was a report from the OSS, and the OSS was like, we want to start a communist insurgency inside of Indochina. We want to start a terror bombing campaign, assassinations, and propaganda for the sake of getting the Japanese out. And we want to use a guy and they used one of the pseudonyms of Ho Chi Minh. We want to link up with that guy, and we want to link up with him using Zhu Enlai, which was the second in command to Mao in China. That was the plan. And, FDR wanted to have the native Vietnamese in charge of their country at some point in the future, and helped facilitate to make that happen. When the Japanese couped the French forces, the Vichy French forces out of power officially in March of 1945, the United States did not intervene to keep the French in place. We did not try and stop the Japanese from kicking them out. And the French at that point went to Dien Bien Phu, which would become famous later for the battle in the 1950s. And then, they did not have the assistance of the American government. FDR explicitly was like, do not help them. And that goes to show you that FDR was always intent on destroying the European Christian empires. He was always intent on doing that. He held that view from, I think, as early as 1928 and followed through in the war. And the only reason that didn't fully happen was because he was dying. I'm convinced.
Why? So why? Like, what? FDR's are such a weird. Like what animated him? What did he want?
Liberalism.
Was it ideological or was it material?
Yeah, he was Antifa in the sense. I think that they are now kind of more or less, not as fervent in some ways, but in a memorandum of a conversation that he had with one of his advisors, the memo says that FDR at one point made the comment that he wanted to liberate 1.1 billion brown people. And I'm quoting FDR in the memo. And he says he wanted to liberate them from their white masters. So he saw it in explicitly racial and ideological terms that decolonization, he was a liberal progressive in the sense of we need to have planetary uplift for all mankind. And you can't have nation states that are concerned about their quote unquote selfish interests of preserving their natural rights. That's mean. It means you're not paying attention to the downtrodden, who need to be uplifted by the wise, progressive, expert ruling class. And so, that was FDR's view of justice. And it's much closer to the one that we have now. You need to concern for the least among us. That is more or less what FDR thought. I mean, it's, somewhat mediated by circumstance, but when it came to decolonization, that was his view. We need to, and by the way, FDR basically expressed in private that he considered the British Empire to be on par with, kind of on the same spectrum as Nazi Germany. They're an aggressive power ruling people without their consent, and that's bad. And kind of at one point is, Churchill would just be berated by FDR in private. You need to let the Indians be on their own country. You're bad. We need to get rid of all that. And there was always, I think, closer ideological affinity between FDR and Stalin. FDR in the private notes out of Yalta and at these other conferences, he bashes Churchill. He says, Churchill wants to empower the French and make them powerful, but I'm telling you here in private, that's bad. I don't want the French back in Indochina. We need to take that from them. And duplicity too. So, a lot of people, I think, they'll be like, you'll talk to boomers, they're like, everything went wrong with Obama. And it's like, no. And it would be like the 1960s. No, you got to go further back. And I think it's really the 30s and 40s that you see really clearly the birth of the liberal order.
I mean, what you're talking about though is like, some of the the racial third worldism, right? Like the pro, like the revolution against Europe kind of thing. Like a lot of people point to the 60s as the genesis of that, but a lot of those tendencies, took place, you're saying, in FDR and even earlier.
Yeah, he expresses them. I mean, not everywhere, not always in public, but he had that thought in private that this is bad. Now he wasn't like full on, we need to give these people all freedom right away. He wanted like a trusteeship program managed by the UN. And but the point was, Europe in some way is bad. These people, they want to dominate the world. And I think FDR was more ideologically consistent. He was more radical than people typically gather from the way he's presented. But they at one point, FDR wanted to draft American workers. They wanted to socialize the whole economy. I mean, and they basically did for several years. Between 1942 and 1945, I don't think there were any new car models made in America. And you have rationing, you have freeze on wage increases. That's why we have health insurance now, because of that. Income tax, the proliferation of taxation. It's hard to imagine. There was a time in American history where the ordinary person did not pay taxes. Outside of property taxes, all taxes really were paid through tariffs and through business taxes. I mean, super wealthy might pay some income, but that wasn't a thing. And FDR transformed all of that. And it, again, is really not well understood. But yeah, the third worldist, and that just goes to the deeper point, is the communist revolution against Christianity and against Europe. That's what that was. The hatred of, you make me sad. Mao Zedong is a helpful figure. As a young man, Mao Zedong he started a society called Avenge the Shame, is the translation from the Chinese. Avenge the Shame. And he felt shame as a peasant. He felt just that resentment. I mean, Mao would unbuckle his pants in public and pick lice out of his pubic hair in public. And you can see that's that middle finger to decency, to standards. There's something similar between girls screaming F the patriarchy and Mao picking lice out of his pubic hair. There's a similar psychological and spiritual phenomenon that's the revolution against authority, and the sense that Western civilization had lost its confidence in itself. And you see that manifest all throughout all of this.
So like we have this picture of, the way that they thought about the world, the 20th century and Americanism, but people say that, the United States was always this propositional nation and we always had this outlook. That's kind of how it was founded. But maybe contrast, like, what was the actual ethos of justice at the founding? Great question. I mean, I'd say America is in some way, I mean, not in the cringe way, but there's a proposition at the heart of the country that makes America what it is. I mean, there was a time when you had European colonists living in North America, but they weren't the colonists weren't Americans. They didn't have their own regime. And so the real proposition at the heart of the American regime that was formed was the protection of natural rights. And the idea, and the concept of rights is always under attack by quote unquote conservatives today. People like Yoram Hazony attacking John Locke. There's like a straight line from John Locke to transgender story hour. And it is all yes. And I don't think Hazony knows Locke very well at all. In fact, I know as much. And then there's the guy out of Notre Dame, Patrick
Deneen.
Yeah. Again, I don't want to be too critical, but I would say if he were sitting here right now, I'd be like, Patrick, you don't understand the founding. You don't understand Locke very well either. And that's a problem, but because the founders had a view of limited government and a view of justice, and they implemented that pretty consistently throughout their whole regime, that we need to protect the people's rights, and that means you need limited government, you need consent. Imagine if we could have government by consent today. That means you can't have illegal immigration and anchor babies. That doesn't work.
Yeah.
And when the founders meant equality, they meant equal protection of the law. And I would like that. I would like equal protection of the law.
Would be nice.
Imagine, that would be nice. It's like, okay, because someone is black doesn't mean you give them special benefits, because that's what you get in our time. And maybe I'm not allowed to say that, but maybe also people can start thinking like, no, it's true. You have open racial preference in your regime. Yeah. And it's like, no, it's like, what's that mom of the kid who shot up the school here in Michigan, and they put her in jail for manslaughter, or they sentenced her just the other day. And I was like, well, I notice you're not doing that to the parents of urban youths who are misbehaving
in Detroit.
Yeah, and that's just a clear sign of the sort of outright. There was here in Hillsdale, there was a young black male who committed a shooting, attempted murder, drug deal, gone wrong is the way I think this is typically described. So attempted murder, felon in possession of a firearm, drug dealing. I think like 5 different felonies they were trying to get this guy on. It was on tape. They caught him on tape, and then they got I think even one of the witnesses identified this guy, and he went up before the judge after pleading guilty to just one of the charges, felon in possession of a firearm. Max sentence of 5 years for attempted murder, right? This is a conservative county, 75% for Trump. Gets in front of the judge, and the judge is like, I want to give you a second chance. She reduced it down to probation. And I knew a guy who was arrested for drunk driving, for pulling into his driveway at 2 a.m, driving 25 miles an hour and failing to use his turn signal into his own driveway. And this is like a guy who barely was over the limit, like 1 beer an hour, but you're actually just right over probation, and you get a moral lecture from the DA.
Yeah.
You're bad. And it's like, wait a second here. And the point I made at the time was like, that's misbehavior. You need to equal application of the law. If a white guy commits murder, you should throw the book at him. If a black guy commits murder or attempted murder, throw the book at him. But don't sit here and tell me America's justice system is this white supremacist, racist thing. It's not true. It's not even close to being true. It's
like the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's the exact opposite. And it's bad. It's bad. And so the founders would have looked at that and said, nope, we have the rule of law, and you have real consent, and the protection of your rights. Like protection from people trying to harm you. That's what government is supposed to do. And I wish the right wingers could just talk about protecting people's rights, enforce the law. That's how the founders would have talked about it.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it reminds me, I think it was probably Zero HP Lovecraft or someone like that on Twitter, just tweeted about like, okay, if a normie white guy who's an accountant or something lives in the suburbs, goes into an urban area and, commits murder and robs people and steals a car or whatever, they would immediately, there's a million security cameras everywhere. They'd catch him in a heartbeat. They take the cell phone data, they do all of that. Well, it's not any different for all of the crime that already happens in the country. You could shut it all down today if the will was there.
There was there's a great tweet, and I don't know, it's like, man, maybe this is like, I forget even the username, Blue Falafel. It's like a blast of the past. But there's this guy, he was tweeting, he said, look, the state has a monopoly on violence. And so every time you see crime and violence taking place, therefore the state must have wanted that to happen in some way. Because if they didn't, they'd stop it. And it's basically true. I mean, the homelessness crisis in America could be solved like that. There's harsh ways of solving it. There's nicer ways, but the point is, you could solve it if you wanted to. They did it
in San Francisco when Xi Jinping came.
Yeah, when it's important, they solve problems. So that means they want homelessness and they like it. That's what it comes down to. And all the other rationalization, it's like, no, you could make this go away right now. It goes back to our point earlier about just a man standing up and saying no. If you did that, a lot of these things would be solved. Bukele walks in, I'm just going to throw people in jail until this goes away. Okay, and then it works. It's like, was it problematic? Yeah, sure. I'm sure they snatched up people who were not doing anything wrong. But the point is, you can either have a country that has like one of the lowest murder rates in the world, or you can have one of the highest. And it would be better to solve your problems without having to resort to extreme measures. So again, I'm a moderate centrist. I want democracy.
Yeah.
I wish we could have fair and free elections. That'd be awesome.
Yeah. I love the
Paper
Constitution.
ballots.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to have the Constitution. I really do. Like when the Constitution talks about ourselves and our posterity, they're talking about me because my ancestors were here and fought for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Samuel Lippincott, one of my grandfather's grandfather's grandfather, I believe, somewhere, something like that. He was in the Revolutionary War and was held as a prisoner of war by the British, and he fought for the country. Yeah. That's I'd like to have that back, please. Yeah. I don't see why that would be, that worked a lot better than this too, in a lot of ways.
But that's, having a country for your posterity, that's racist and bad. You can't do that. You can't have that. That's mean.
Yeah, I've been told it's super mean. It's funny. The word nation comes from the Latin, from natus, relating to birth. But nobody talks. It's like
weird.
I mean, then it's like, well,
no, it's it's an economic zone, man. It's just random people that happen to be in a particular area. That's what.
Yeah, I tell the libertarians I know. I said I'm totally in favor of free trade, but there are different political regimes. They're not the same. Yeah, they're not the same, and you gotta politics, economics, oikos nomos, the way of the household, politics, the science of the city, knowledge of the city, way of the city. You could translate it some of those ways. Okay, the city is in some way more important than the individual household because you got to live together. You got to make it all work, and you need laws to do that. You're never, you can't, again, you got to think about what words mean and what's actually happening. And that's always going to be hard it's hard when reality is hard to look at. That's what I've noticed. People don't want to know. They don't want to see. No. Some don't.
But I mean, that's why we do this. That's why we have this show to talk about these things, because the people watching and it's like 98% men, according to our YouTube stats.
I'm shocked to hear that. There's no way. There's no way.
I'll send you a screenshot.
Yeah, I can't even believe that. There's got to be a female fan club. Have you ever seen the categories of books that are bought by men? It's like all the categories of books are like bought by women, but then it's like philosophy and politics, and it's like overwhelmingly male. And it's like,
interesting.
Yeah.
But
real. You've been socially constructed into doing this.
It's it's the patriarchy, man.
Yeah, right.
I mean, I'm sure you saw the Barbie movie, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, not yet. I've just been too preoccupied with Gilmore Girls. You really got to work your way through the.
Hey, just like,
yeah.
I want to change the subject here. Can I ask you, did you like Hillsdale?
Yeah, no, it was a great school.
Yeah, I mean, so do you think overall Hillsdale has done a good job at holding the fort down and not getting caught up in things?
I recently wrote an article for American Greatness where I said that Barron Trump should come to Hillsdale in the fall. So if Barron's watching or any of the Trump people are watching, you should do that. It'd be good for him. And I wrote that, and I think I said things there I know I said things there that were true. And what I said was that Hillsdale College is one of the very few places in America where real learning is possible within an institution. Yeah. And I believe that to be true. We are different than the norm. And I'm glad there's a place where I can do scholarly work. I think it is valuable. It is useful. The project I'm working on for my dissertation is important. It's valuable, and I want to get it done, and I'm glad I can do it here. So there are really good teachers here, and it's the best school of its kind. Now, in a way, that's a real problem because there's thousands of colleges in America, and a lot of them are insane. And it's bad. There's really only a handful of places where you can have real learning. And, Hillsdale's not immune from the pressures of the culture and the regime, but it's the best you're going to do now. So I would support it. So, if you got a really smart kid and you're like, well, where should I send them? I said, if they're looking at college, you can't really do better than Hillsdale.
Yeah, no, that's good.
People are like, oh, I got to get some technical degree. If you've got anything in you that's like interested in books or history or politics, our politics program is awesome. We have the best in the country. I mean, there are smart people elsewhere, but the politics program here, which is the program I've spent my time in, is excellent. it's just I don't think it gets better than this. People can fight about that for ideological reasons, and there are places.
Do people at professors, do they know about your your rocky experience on the internet?
Yeah, I think people know. You
Yeah.
know, there are people who know and follow and are interested in it. I think, I think I say interesting things kind of wherever I go. I'm not going to say everyone loves it, but it is. I try and be earnest and serious, and I think and morally upright as well. I don't think there's anything I say where it's like bad in some way. I think it's always challenging. I mean, I don't expect everybody to agree, but I do try and be thought-provoking and intelligent. So, I mean, I assume it gets around. I assume people can read it. I encourage them to. Got a Substack. You should go. Every one of your listeners should go find it. Lippincott.substack.com. Go read it. Even if you hate it. I think another thing is people will often, I'll notice the critics of mine, people who don't like my work, won't come and talk to me about it. They want to make sure, they want to keep me as an abstraction. Like it's easier to hate someone when you don't have to engage with them and try and. I'm a very actually kind of almost like polite to a fault in some ways. So I'm happy to discuss my ideas with critics. It's it's easier to pull stuff out of context than hate me from afar, I think. And that's what I've noticed is the trend.
Yeah, the same thing happens to me. I mean, people will. I mean, even like it's funny doing like a podcast now. People will see like stuff I write on Twitter and online and articles and things, and think I'm like this really mean, nasty guy that is just a jerk. And then they see me on here, and it's like, oh, he's a nice guy. He's fun and jolly and things.
I wonder if I'm too nice. I sometimes think I wonder what the country would be like if I could have like real free speech. I feel like it'd be funnier. I always feel like the internal censor, the real consequence of internal censorship is always the loss of the sense of humor. You can't crack the jokes you'd like to crack. But I think it's the freedom of anonymity. And if I were any good as an anon, I would create an account and then do stuff. But I've never been good at that. I'm always a little too earnest, a little too easy to find me, I think, as well. That's what my assumption would be like. If I, there's not that many people who are going to do the sort of things I spurg out about are going to be.
They'll know it's you.
Dox myself. Wow, there's a lot of stuff about Japan and the Far East. Oh, got me.
Exactly. Well, do you have anything else you want to ask CJ?
No, I think that was good. I mean, we didn't get too much into the immigration thing, but
the whole title of the episode is about the immigration thing. I guess we could close out with that.
Sure.
To reward the people that have listened for an hour and 23 minutes.
Yeah, right.
What I mean, do you look at it? I mean, I'll give my perspective on it, and you can argue with me or agree or whatever. But like, I look at it where it's the regimist Republicans in the Senate wanted to undercut Trump in the campaign and put this arrangement together that basically legalizes the invasion that's happening, legalizes everything that's Biden has been doing or not doing for the last 3 years, in order to seemingly resolve. We had somebody in the comments saying, complaining about how like this is to help Trump or something. It's like, well, no, like the point of the deal was to hurt Trump. Yeah. That's the end, to keep the problem going, to keep the flood of third world people coming through the border and never have it addressed. And all of it is a scam to get money for Ukraine and Israel and whatever else they want.
I mean, it seems compelling to me. I mean, I think some of these people are just like born losers. Like they can't, their instincts point them the wrong way. They're like weather vanes, but always the wrong direction. You can just do a 180 and figure out what is actually valuable there. I mean, I think the idea that anyone should be trying to give Joe Biden any kind of electoral victory during an election year is insane in and of its own, right? You're not, for one, that Congress can pass all the laws they want. It doesn't matter because Joe Biden is not going to enforce the law. He's not going to do that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. You could have the perfect bill. But no, Biden is not going to enforce. That's not how that's going to work. And so the reality is that the border is going to remain open until the election, at least, and then beyond until Inauguration Day, and maybe beyond that if Trump can't get control of the executive branch, and God only knows what's going to happen in the fall. So, I mean, I just think the Mayorkas impeachment, that I thought would have been that you could have actually done stuff with. Now, he'd have been immediately. The Senate was not going to convict him, but the point is that would have been a real win, and the conservatives immediately stabbed themselves.
Yeah,
McClintock, Gallagher, and then Ken Buck out of Colorado. I mean, these people should all be kicked out of the party. Just you're done. You're done. You do not know what time it is. There are people who are not even literate who could have gotten that right. Yeah. Like, sometimes you look at people and are like, why were you taught how to read? Like, what good did that do you? I'm not sure it did any. It's just like, it's mass literacy. I mean, I like mass literacy for some, but not for midwits. Just a ban, complete ban. You have a 120 IQ. It's a bad idea. I'm sorry to inform you, but you will not be allowed to do anything but manual labor the rest of your life, just to prevent you from being sort of like a civilization destroying, force. I read the news. Wow, and we're immediately going to send you to the logging camp in northern Michigan. It's a big problem. I read The Economist. The articles in The Atlantic have been really insightful these days.
Exactly, man.
What a waste. What a waste.
Yeah.
And like, the moment that guy heard the music to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star with the alphabet, bad. Nothing good came of that. So, I mean, that's my take on the Republicans overall is, why are you doing this? Yeah. Why is this even a thing? The only thing, look, how does political power work in America? Every single one of these bills is BS. You should not do any of them. Mm-hmm. The only way to get what you want is to fight over funding. And Republicans should drive a hard bargain. It should be like, you will give us one thing that we want every time you come asking for money. And if you don't do that, no money. Yeah. And and then pass bills. We'll pass bills funding portions of the government. Social Security is getting funded today, and the military, but not everything else. Yep. Like, we're just going to let you pay for bureaucrats in DC? Nope. Yeah. Nope. Give us one thing. You can. That's when you can have compromise. Like, look, the libs want to give money to Ukraine. Okay, you're going to give us the border wall. There's no amnesty. No, the border wall. We will build that. And for every mile of wall you build or increase in security, we grant you a little more money for Ukraine. That would be real politics. And I don't think the funding for Ukraine is good, but that would at least show you got that dog in you that says, I'm going to win. I'm going to pull out a victory. Mm-hmm. That's how real politics works. And these people are like, well, my solution is to surrender, blather to my constituents, and then perform harakiri in front of the American people for no reason. That's my genius strategy. It's like, you just might as well. I mean, I think I wrote this article a long time ago. Like, America doesn't need the U.S. Senate. And that, we're at the point, like, that's like a nursing home for the dying. I mean, have you seen this? There's like this, it's like on TikTok or Instagram or whatever. And it's like the village for people with dementia. And they can like pretend it's like a real city, like where they do stuff. They just wander around.
That's like the U.S. Senate.
Yeah. Senate, effectively. Yeah. I mean, it's, Biden, it's like, that's what it is. Like, and if you do that, then talking about constitutional norms makes no sense, because the founders were not people addled with dementia, collecting massive salaries and doing illicit land deals with your campaign donors so that you can enrich yourself. That was not the point of the institution. So that's kind of where we are. That's just my broad take. Like, if you want control, do it in the budgetary process, hold everything hostage, demand one thing every single time. And that's the way to do it. And if you're not doing that, you're waiting. You're not doing anything else. You're waiting for that moment. And that's not what the Republicans could do right now.
So what is your take? I mean, I don't know when we'll be able to have you back on again, and what your schedule will be, but it's if we don't get to have you on before November, and maybe we will, what happens?
Oh man. I feel more confident. I think if you did a real election in America, and I've always thought this, then this would have happened in 2020, Donald Trump would win in a landslide. Yeah. Like, if you purged every voter roll, you required paper ballots, same day voting, voter ID, and you got to register and indicate that you're going to vote before you get up there. So no same day registration.
Mhm.
If you did that, Donald Trump would win in a landslide. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
it would be that QAnon electoral map where like he won California.
Yeah.
I mean, the laws are already in place in the opposite direction. I mean, they've already like that was what's her name from the Federalist, Molly, whatever her name is.
Hemingway.
Yeah, sure. I mean, her book on the way they restructured the election laws prior to, I mean, that had a way bigger impact than any of the like secret night things that they did. I mean, that's a long lasting change.
Yeah, and there's all kinds of ways, people can fight about stolen. I mean, was it Dominion? Was this like the point is there are so many different ways you could do that if you really wanted to, and people wanted to, and you mean to tell me that these people aren't doing anything shady? That's such BS. Yeah, and the one thing I'd say is the flow of immigrants into the United States is a way of stealing elections. If you elect a new Demos, you can win elections if you elect a new Demos. Democracy is great as long as I get to choose the people who are voting. Okay, easy, and that's one way of stealing elections or making them, I think, spiritually fraudulent. But the bigger point is there's all kinds of other malfeasance at play. Now, the question is Biden is not popular at all. No. And is the regime going to go to bat for him in 2024? I mean, I think there's a lot of resistance to that. That special counsel report, that's damning. And I think Biden is not mentally competent. He isn't going to be able to go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump. And it's going to be obvious. Yeah. You could steal it for him. I mean, you could pull all the tricks out of the book, but you could then have the legitimacy problem. Because I'm telling you right now, I don't know if Biden's even going to make it to the end of the year. But what I will say is I don't think he's going to make it to the end of his second term. I don't think it's going to happen. No way. No. 85, 86 years old in office. It's just not going to happen. And
Trump looks younger than he did in 2016, though.
Yes, that's amazing. And my point is, you could try. I mean, Democrats could steal it. I mean, you could just mystical votes, and we had a bunch of mail-in, and everything happened. Mm-hmm. But I think right now, I do not get the sense that. I get the sense that's not necessarily going to happen. I mean, but we'll see. I mean, libs could decide to go crazy. In some ways, the brakes are off that train. So
yeah.
But, like the Fannie Willis stuff is imploding. I mean, that was some magical experience that's going on there, to use a Scott Greer phrase that I think is applicable. It's like you believed your own propaganda and thought that would be a good idea. But, like, if you know anything about how inner city politics in America work, that is corrupt as the day is long. So you're going to get that. And then you're going to throw that dude in jail. You're going to put Trump in jail and then talk about democracy.
Yeah.
I mean, are you really? And then you're going to have an 80-something-year-old man up there. And if it's not Biden, let's say there's some way to get someone else in. You mean you're going to have a candidate for president who no Democrat primary voter is going to have voted for? They're going to do that? You're going to do that and then run an election? Is that going to work?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, I think at this point, I mean, I think there's always the possibility of the crazy, like riots. Someone just does something just nuts. I mean, that is more on the table than it's ever been. But I think, overall, there is also a possibility that the factions on the left that are able to think might go, yeah, we need Trump back. Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan and Chase Bank or something like that.
Goldman Sachs, yeah,
one of these guys. He was on TV, like, he was saying, well, the economy was better under Trump. And it's, they might be thinking, well, we should act in our own rational self-interest. Now, I don't know if they can do that, but that'd be my thought. Is I'm more confident than I've ever been that Trump will make it to the election and be able to run. I don't know if that's likely, but I'm more confident than I have been. And I think there's a very real possibility he just straight up wins it all. And then that's a whole new ball game itself, because
yes, it is.
The radical factions on the left aren't going away, and they're going to be around, and they're going to be mad. And
I definitely feel a lot more confident than I did like at this point in 2020, right? Even before the pandemic and everything else, like I felt like him running as an incumbent took a lot of the wind out of the sails, where he can't have this like foil of the regime, because it's hard to, even though he's fighting against the regime as president, it's hard to make the case to people, to your average person in America.
I'll be honest. I'll be honest. In 2020, at this time, what I remember, and it happened right around this date a few years ago, in 2020, Trump took the victory lap in the Beast at the NASCAR track.
Yeah.
And that I was like, this dude's going to win a landslide.
Yeah.
It's over. I thought it was going to be a blowout. And I think I was right. I think if it had not been for COVID and the crazy, they would have been just crazy. They would have been beaten. And the COVID crazy happened because of Trump.
Yeah.
And that was designed to get him out of office. And I guess it worked, but the left paid a price for that too. And that's, laws require legitimacy. Come full circle. Laws require legitimacy, and you need legitimacy in order to have a regime. So that's where we are.
And I think this is stuff we talk about all the time here, is that regimes in general, like when they lose legitimacy, they implement. This is stuff we talked about, like Charles Haywood. Once legitimacy is gone, like it's very hard to build it up, and once it's gone. It doesn't come back, and that's when things collapse. And at the same time, you have the most powerful regime really in world history that is, possibly maybe in its death throes, feeling the loss of legitimacy. And that's when like world historic evil takes place.
You could see people doing crazy stuff. And I mean, I can't even say what I think that would mean, but I could see crackdowns. I mean, false flags or even real violence from people responding to stuff. And I don't want that. I mean, it would be better if we could find a way to avoid that. And it goes back to the 90s solution. You could have done the whole free trade thing. You basically screwing the white working class. Okay, but you didn't have to flood the country with Africa, Mexico, Central America, Asia. You didn't need to do that. You didn't have to do that. And liberals still would have been wealthy. I mean, it's like the difference between, okay, so in this circumstance, in this alternate history, you only got $200 million as opposed to the billion you have now. Yeah. Is that really that big of a loss? But they couldn't think rationally. I mean, they couldn't even think semi-rationally, not even within that framework that they had built up. So, then you've got this. And I think you're right that in the death throes, they could do some terrible things. Every time the left takes over in a country, they start shooting people. That's just the way it works. Cambodia, Laos, Soviet Union, China, Korea, Indochina, Germany after World War I, Hungary, Poland. I mean, they always do.
France in 1789. Yeah.
They always do the same thing. Why do you think they wouldn't do that here? It just doesn't. It's historically, that doesn't make any sense. And the biggest problem they have is they've been victimized by their own propaganda. The liberals are really, truly guzzling seed oils and trying to chop their genitals off and take hormones and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's like, well, that is going to hurt you, but I don't know. I mean, so that's where I think we are now. Is the best case scenario for the country is Trump wins, and then liberals kind of back off for 4 years and give us time to moderate. Can they do that? Can they even make that choice? I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, the proof will be in the pudding. If they put Trump in jail, we're just in a whole new ball game, and that could happen.
Yeah.
So,
I think it'll happen. I think that I don't know. I think that they've shown what they're willing to do to stop him, and I don't think they've run out of tricks yet. And I think they're willing to play a lot more desperate moves. I mean, it's funny though, because Trump's more popular now that they indicted him. So
well, and that's a problem for them too. And I think that gave them pause like that. I think part of the plan was, okay, we'll let you arrest him and do all this stuff. But the point is, the very being arrested and charged will be what will cause him to be defeated in the primary by our preferred regime candidate, DeSantis or Haley. Then we'll have nothing but rainbows from there on out, and then we'll have good old-fashioned politics, and people stop believing in Trump. And it did not work.
Yeah,
they could have known that it wouldn't work before it happened. And so I think after that, it's like a special counsel. Why did he include that line? It's like the DOJ slapping Hillary in 2016 under Comey. It was like, no, you got to you're not really in charge here. And that means that there's factions within the regime that are not on Team Biden. And that means there's always the possibility that the handlers get the conversation from the money and the power. Like, nope, we're going to let things just ride on this one. And, like Biden can't do events. Like the Super Bowl's coming up, and the president would have this pre-Super Bowl event. He's not even doing it. He can't do it. I mean, he can't be out there. I mean, they know that. I mean, I think it's Blinken is like physically squirming while listening to Biden talk about foreign affairs. Yeah. I mean, you cannot. I mean, what's the debate going to be like? You're going to have Biden debate Trump? How's that?
I don't think there's going to be one. Yeah. I think they're going to refuse.
So you're not going to do any debates. Let's say you do that. No debates. You're barely doing rallies. The ones you do are going to be small. There won't be any signs, no flags, no parades, nothing. And Trump's going to have a huge screaming crowds. And we're going to get to election day and discover mystically Biden won. It's amazing.
85 million votes. Yeah.
100 million votes. It's true. Donald Trump won 92 million. But actually, if you think about it, there was an extra 20 million people we just didn't have accounted for. And they just appeared out of nowhere. It's like, are we really? They could do it. I mean, I don't put it past them, but I don't know if it's like
I think they could do it. And if they do, the thing is, like, I go back to the Putin interview from last night, and one of my takeaways from that interview is that, and obviously you take everything he says with a grain of salt because he's another foreign leader, an adversary of the United States. Even if we had a normal, real country with leadership, right, he would be in this adversarial position. And so I'm not saying it as like a Putin fan or something, but as he's describing it, I can't help but think, these are not serious people that he's dealing with. Like, he talks about how they use monetary policy as a cudgel, and that can for like this short-term gain against Russia, and the long-term drawback of that is monumental for for American power.
Well, I think so. Yeah, they don't have. They can't think in long term, and at some point we will pay the Pied Piper, and that will be a bad day. It will be a terrible day. I mean, there's stuff brewing. The housing market's a great example. Yeah. People who are younger than me, if you're like 18 years old, you're entering college right now, it's like the best chance is that you'll be able to own a home in your 40s. You might be able to get a mortgage because you are not going to be able to keep pace with inflation and with the skyrocketing value of homes. And it's like, that's not something that Biden can just wave away. You got to live with that. You got to live with it. And people are going to be mad about stuff like that. They are mad. People are mad. I'm not happy. And I'm doing way better than a lot because, I'm outside of the main metros and all that, but I still get really angry. It's like, how can I have worked and been as frugal as I am, and then I'm still driving cars that are almost 2 decades old? Like, this is my lot, huh? It's like, I get it. My wife and I are both professionals. Why is it that everything seems like it's skyrocketing in price all the time? And I think that goes to the heart of the problem, which is Biden cannot just hand wave all that away, and the liberals can't do it. They don't know how to do it. They don't have the long-term survival instinct that would cause them to do it. So something's coming. I mean, Trump is a moderate. And that's why he's good. And if liberals were listening, embrace the moderation. Yeah, he's actually pretty moderate on social issues. Yeah. If they weren't crazy, Roe v. Wade being overturned is not that big of a deal. It just isn't. It's just not. Now they're nuts, so they can't think. It's like abortion's still gonna be legal at the state level. What are you talking about? Gays can get, married. I mean, shit, they probably get, marry like 4 or 5 people at a time at this point. I mean, who would really be opposed to that? I mean, what are you doing? Like, you've gotten everything you want. So why are you so mad? Like, why are you going nuts? Like, just let it ride. Like, let Trump do his thing.
It's just it's built into their entire momentum that they have to do one thing more every year. That's how they've been for 100 years.
It's biological and it's psychological. They'll never be happy until it's all in ashes, and even then they'll blame the collapse on the original enemy. So I guess that's so. But I don't think normal Americans, when really presented, they don't really want to do that. They don't want that, and not to be like cringe civic nationalist boomer, but that it isn't just middle class white America. I think there's a lot of people. I'm not saying a majority by far, but there's a lot of like, what is this? Like, this is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, and I think tapping into that is the way going forward. So I'm kind of hopeful around Trump, but if not, there will still be possibilities that come out of it, because regardless of what happens, the right will not suddenly find itself without a need for young leaders, without new, fresh ideas. That will continue to be the case well into the future. So
I think we're coming up on a moment of real radicalization. Like if like either way this goes, I think the left's going to do what the left does and panic if Trump gets in, and a lot of like right wingers are going to realize that the left is more serious than they are, and they want complete control. Yeah. And if they do whatever it takes to get Trump out, I think a lot of right wingers are going to be completely disillusioned with the system. So either way, I think that we're in for a rocky future. And
so I tell people, I was like, lift weights.
Yeah.
You need to, I'm not saying go full prepper. You just gotta be ready. I mean, you don't know what's going to happen. And I would rather be, you just have it in your mind. Like some stuff could be crazy. I've had a number of people that I've known, like I've said earlier, who've been arrested and will probably go to jail. And some of them have gone to jail. Well, one in particular of a really disgusting case, but that's a real possibility. Yeah. And I'm thankful I'm not in that position right now. And I want to avoid that as long as possible, but I don't have any illusions in my mind. If you want to blaze your own trail, you are in danger, and you got to get that. And if it's in a way, I'm lucky I'm not that important, because otherwise I'd be targeted. But that's also a problem. Like I wish I had more of an ability to influence things, and that will be needed. So yeah, this is a time for preparation. Every moment of peace and relative stability that you have to take advantage of to prepare. Physically and spiritually and in those ways. So that's my takeaway. It's my life advice if anybody cares to hear it.
Awesome.
Cool. I think we should start to wrap up here. I got kids are gonna bang down the door any second here. So
you probably can hear my kids. They came home and
build a bigger wall.
Right. Right.
Well, where can we find your work? So Lippincott, Lippincott at Substack.com. And American Greatness as well.
Yeah, I have a column that publishes basically every 2 weeks. Right, it's usually like a day or two after the 1st and the 15th of the month. I have a column that comes out at American Greatness, and then I have the blog at the Substack, which I use to share a lot of the American Greatness pieces as well. And then I'm also on Telegram. You can find me there just under my name. And, I'm not on Twitter, obviously. But yeah, those are the primary ways to find me. And then I encourage people to do so. And then hopefully in the future, so once my dissertation is done, I'll be more active, and then more, really make a play to try and come back on Twitter in a big way. So
good.
If anybody cares. I mean, the point is, I'm holding off for right now, just for one, so I actually do my work and finish it, which I think is important. And also, just so that I finish without having people trying to get me kicked out of the college and stuff like that, which is always a danger.
All right, and your dissertation, are you going to publish that as a book?
That's a hope. I have had some feelers. I've sent out feelers regarding publication, so we'll see. I mean, I really need the draft to be done. I mean, we're probably talking at least another year or two, probably at least, and then probably more, just depending on how that process goes. But I've wanted to do that project. I think it'll be important. I think it'll be groundbreaking, and it will be a way of viewing. There's a way of unifying the things that we've seen in the world order with our own contemporary events and historically how it developed. And hopefully it'll help people think clearly about war and peace, which are issues that are always pertinent, I think.
Absolutely. Well, Josiah, thank you so much for your time, all the time. Almost 2 hours here that you've given us. I appreciate it. CJ appreciates it. I'll speak for him, and thank you. We'll love to have you back on again as things continue to get crazier. But until then, everybody out there, thank you so much for listening. Please like, subscribe, share. We want as many people to see this conversation as possible, because Josiah's got fantastic stuff to say. And until next time, stay peacefully dangerous, and we will see you next time.
All right.